What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here. We're repping America, the center, and common sense. And as I like to remind people, try to keep love in your heart. I mean, there's way too much hate out there. Man, the online community is just a cesspool of people, isn't it? Man, I don't know. I'd like to see some comments on my videos or podcast, but that never came to fruition. But it's been one of those weeks. Been kind of a long one. Didn't get a lot to do time to work on this podcast. So let's see how it goes. All right, I'm gonna kick this one off with a story that came out of Los Angeles Magazine. I was really taken back by the headline here. In a stunning blow to Los Angeles Pauls, L.A. U.S. attorney announces homeless fraud task force. Don't really know why the politicians would be so upset about that, but anyhow, we got this new U.S. attorney for Los Angeles, Bill Essaley. He's only been in office for about a week, and he announced that he formed a homelessness, fraud, and corruption task force to investigate fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption involving funds allocated towards the unrelenting issue of the unhoused. Yeah, the unhoused. Right off the bat, you know where this person, the writer, is coming from. Because, the truth of the matter is yes, there are a lot of people who are unhoused. I'm not saying that every single person on the street is mentally ill or on drugs or chose to live on the streets. No, I get it. There are a lot of people out there. I see, one of the things, I've mentioned this before here in California, in certain areas we had quite an increase in property values. And a lot of people pulled the equity out of their home. The amount between what a home is worth and what you owe. That's your equity. They pulled it out. They bought motorhomes. Then they ended up getting divorced. They had to sell the house. And then through child support, alimony, things like that, a lot of fathers, just decided to, hey, camper life, right? It's a choice that people make. Other people make that choice just simply so they don't have to pay bills, have some of those responsibilities that the rest of us have. I know people who have done that, who have basically just lived the camper life for, the ease and to save money. And those people, sure, let's try to help them however we can, but let's stop deluding ourselves into believing that these people want any help at all. A lot of these people just want to live on the streets, do their drugs, and that's fine. They've come to peace with that as their lifestyle, and that's what they're going to do. And when they get bored, we've seen cases like in New York with Steve Buscemi, where a homeless guy just decided to start randomly punching people. We've seen homeless people attack, rob people. We've seen them just following women around, harassing them, getting threatening in front of a 7-Eleven, attacking people, when they don't give them money. This is a real problem, and the solution is not more government spending to support these people, because what they're doing nowadays is they're facilitating them. They're subsidizing the homeless people. The truth of the matter is a large percentage of these people on the streets either need to be in a mental hospital where they can receive medication and care, or they need to be in jail because they're committing crimes. And for us to just sit back and say, well, let's just continue on like this. Look, we tried this. We tried the softy, the nice approach, the subsidizing them, and it doesn't work. So, as SLA says here, California has spent more than $24 billion over the past 5 years. That's almost $5 billion a year to address homelessness. But officials have been unable to account for all the expenditures and outcomes, and the homeless crisis has only gotten worse. Taxpayers deserve answers for where and how their hard-earned money is being spent. Is that really too much to ask, that we know where the money is going and we look at what's being spent? Yay, they got fresh crack pipes and clean needles. And our mayor here in L.A., Karen Bass, told reporter, she hopes the task force doesn't diminish the city's efforts to combat homelessness. As she says, I am not opposed to the task force, but I don't want it to be a fishing expedition, and I don't want it to be a distraction that takes away from what our primary mission is. What is your primary mission? To subsidize or to fix? Because you can't do both. I mean, by giving them money, does that cut down on crime? I don't think so. Because the way I would see it if I was living out on the streets is if you give me money, I'm going to spend that money on my drugs and alcohol, and then I'm going to go out and steal so I have more money for drugs and alcohol. Because when it comes to an addict, you can never have too much. And when you're mentally ill, okay, so maybe by giving them money, they won't commit crimes, but they probably weren't going to commit crimes to begin with. Maybe a little pilfering here and there, but they're going to sit out and beg. And they're going to get what little they need to get their booze or their alcohol, to self-medicate, instead of being in an environment where they can receive actual help and maybe have a future. And I understand part of the problem is we see this a lot with our vets and some of our mentally ill people. They don't really want to be in a confined area. And that's why I really think that part of the solution has to be making sort of like a dedicated campground where people who just want to sleep in a tent underneath the skies and sort of not be bothered can live. And that is a solution that we can have. We can have a facility where it's a very low security prison style. There's mental health facilities there. There's medical facilities there. Obviously, you would want a high level of security, but at the same time, these people should be able to come and go. But we have to give them something to be hopeful for. You have to give them something to work towards. And when you just simply say, hey, we're okay with you living out on the streets doing whatever the hell you want, well, that's not really what we're paying for, is it? I mean, we work our asses off, and then the government takes like 30 to 40% of our money through income taxes, property taxes, sales tax, fees, registrations, and fines. And for what? A government that works against you? I mean, look at California here. We have a government that is attacking our fuel sources, that is trying to force us into expensive EVs that aren't really quite ready for mass market. Look at the self-driving cars out there. You hear stories of them just circling parking lots. We're not quite at the stage where the entire electrification of California or America is, viable. We give them our tax money and then they protect criminals. They set up sanctuary cities. And worst of all, every day we see the effects of them subsidizing these homeless freaks. And that's what some of them are. Not all of them, some of them. Enough that you see them at most places you go to. People passed out on sidewalks. I mean, what goes through your mind when you have to pass by like a little tent city when you're walking as a young lady or as an elderly lady or as a guy who might not be able to take care of himself for various reasons in terms of, fighting something off or presenting a target that most people don't want to go after? What is that like? Because I know myself, I get very wary. I even get a little bit scared sometimes when I see this kind of stuff out there. And for the most part, I think I can handle myself. But I know that not everybody is in that same position. Not everybody's had the training or carries the equipment that I carry, But what we're seeing right now through Doge and through this homelessness fraud task force is the Democrats seem to be very afraid of somebody pulling back the curtain and exposing what's going on. We're going to get into a little more of that in a sec here. Yeah, I love this Bronco comic. I'll put it up, but it's talking about how alternative media is sitting at the big person's table, and legacy media is sitting at the child's table now with their little sippy cup. And I'm glad we're coming back around to this because when I was younger, before I kind of threw my life away, I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to expose politicians. I wanted to expose the truth. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing with this podcast. I'm not trying to convince people to be a member of a certain party. I hope nobody gets that. I'm purple state, and I think we have to vote for people who are more towards the middle and use a lot more common sense. And, I really struggle with accidentally becoming a shill for people like Trump or the conservatives because I disagree with them on a lot. I really do. But at the same time, when I see the media trying to paint a picture, well, I need to correct that picture. Yeah, that's it. This is a funny Babylon Bee that I just had to bring up. It's John Oliver. In the early days, I used to watch The Daily Show, but they've just become so one-sided politically. But this Babylon Bee was great. John Oliver says men clearly have no physical advantage as women beat them at everything. And, one of the things that it brings up is that, a good point to be made out of this is, sure, Venus Williams could beat me at tennis. Okay? She's a woman, I'm a man. Venus Williams can beat me. But she's even said herself, and through actual practical applications, she couldn't even beat a man who was ranked 226th in the world. And that's, one of the things we're still seeing in California, and I think Maine, a few other places, are still allowing boys who self-identify is a very important term to that, because they're simply saying, I feel like a girl, I want to be on the girls' team. They're allowing them to come in and steal glory from, hey, that was our first G, glory. Steal glory from girls' sports, another G. G, it's working out well for G this week. Enough of that. I don't want to get off on that tangent. Here's another Babylon Bee. Winnie the Pooh destitute as Trump enacts 150% tariffs on 100-acre woods. I think that's a shot at what's his name, Ping whatever, over in China. Yeah, I don't respect my enemies enough to remember their names. I'll tell you that much right now. That one's pretty funny. Here's another Babylon Bee tariff one. In yet another cruel blow to China, General Tso's chicken to be renamed General Don's Oriental Chicky Nugs. Oh, man. I know he's playing fast and loose right now. This is a great one. You got this girl and this boy on a roller coaster, and the girl's screaming with happiness, and they have it labeled Trump, and there's a kid over there that's just wide-eyed looking scared and says the rest of us. Yeah, what Trump's doing right now is very unsettling to some degrees. I mean, we don't know how it's going to turn out. But one thing that I keep in mind, okay, is no matter how bad this plan turns out to be, it can't be any worse than the last 4 years. Seriously. Here's another Babylon Bee. Democrats worried Trump may not have China's best interests at heart. It's so true. This is an old one from Bronco that he brought back again. Trump as the Roadrunner from the cartoons, and he says, tariff, tariff. And you see the coyote falling, and he's got a sign that says bully, and he's pointing at Trump with a face that says globalist. Yeah, I mean, the United States has done so much for the world. I feel like a lot of these tariffs at this time, it's like, fine, okay, we subsidize your government through these high tariffs for a while, but those days need to end. One of the reasons why U.S. loses so many manufacturing jobs to other countries is that things that are made in America have high tariffs on them. We can't compete fairly. But, I'm keeping my eye on the tariffs. And one of the things that just popped up this morning is Trump exempts phones, computers, and chips from reciprocal tariffs. Part of the reason why is because he doesn't want additional costs being added for consumers. He knows that there's a reason, a valid reason maybe even, that these things are being built in places like Taiwan or China. Because he gave an exemption to Taiwan for their semiconductors. We need semiconductors for almost everything that has an electronic brain. But, our taxes, as we saw when U.S. aid was shut down, and we saw some of the expenditures, our taxes should not support other nations unless it's in our best interest. It may sound cruel, but it's just realistic. That's it. But fine, we do. We help out other militaries and governments and stuff. That's fine, whatever, okay? But then those nations levy high tariffs on our products. I mean, think about it. We freed Europe. We did. It was our manufacturing that helped the Russians and the Europeans defeat Hitler in World War II, right? Through the Cold War, we protected Europe. Even today, we still protect Europe. We are the strength of NATO. I don't know, without the United States, if NATO could stand up to, say, Russia. Maybe they could. Maybe they could stand up to China. Maybe. They probably could stand up to Iran, but they're not really. But then today, Europe wants a 39% VIG on all our products. I mean, at least in England, they only scam out 10%. But that's what is infuriating to Trump. The fact that we try to do good by the world, and the world says, tariff, 39% for the European Union. I mean, that kind of kills our ability to market our products over there. That's why you don't see our products over there as much. Now, if it was a sales issue, fine, cool. If America doesn't want Coca-Cola, cool, whatever. That's your choice, that's your taste. But if it's because of high tariffs that keep our products out, like rice, I mean, one of the things America has is we have a lot of land that can be farmed to produce fruits, veg, meats, things like that. But it's almost impossible for us to sell them everywhere because of high tariffs. Now, let's take a pause here for a second. For all of you who hate Trump, or you're just scared, you're just concerned like me, what is the alternative to what we have right now? I saw this in a comment section where they were talking about the ongoing conflict over in with Israel. And they said, well, until we get better leadership. Well, what was our alternative? Harris Waltz? So we would just get more illegal immigration. We'd have less deportations. We'd have more kneecapping of vital projects through DEI. We would have American companies supporting the world through tariffs. What were they going to do differently? What would Harris be doing differently right now that would be making anything better? At least what Trump is doing right now is trying to make us better. He sent a message when he deported the Trinidad people to El Salvador. He's trying to negotiate a better tariff structure for the world economy. He's trying to put us on a better foot. Okay? Maybe you don't agree with everything. Maybe you don't like Elon Musk. From all accounts, Elon Musk probably is not a nice guy. And I think he's a bit of I think he's a fudger, man. I think he tells porcupines. But what they're trying to do at least has the promise of bettering our country. You can't say that for Harris Waltz. And the reason why you can't say that for Harris Waltz is we saw it under Biden for 4 years. Things were not better. Some groups, some really tiny groups, seem to show an uptick under Biden. But the overall people, no. We were not in a better place. We were just continuing on. At least Trump is trying to put some money back in American pockets, which might lead to jobs, which might lead to a better future for somebody. I mean, really, seriously. The last administration was literally kneecapping their own efforts. Meanwhile, what's the greatest complaint with Trump right now is the tariffs. He's trying to reset the global economic balance. He doesn't want tariffs, either from or against the United States. He doesn't. These other countries have an advantage already without the tariffs because it's cheaper to manufacture in China when you use slave labor, child labor, or underpaid labor. But then after we send all of these jobs overseas, they still want tariffs? Does that seem even remotely fair? Yeah. Right now, small groups are being hurt. Small groups in our thing are in the United States are seeing some of their privileges getting pulled back. But at the end of the day, common sense is common good. And at least I'm seeing that out of Trump. Trying to do what's best for the most amount of people. So government, the big G. I found this scale here. It's very interesting because they talk about the two ends of the scale are big government and no government. And in the middle, limited government, which is most Republicans, conservatives, a little bit towards the no governing side is the 1776 U.S. founding fathers and libertarians. I think I'm somewhere in between conservatives and libertarians on that. But what's really interesting is when you get to the end of no government, that's the anarchists. It's really weird to think that Republicans are somewhat close, or at least libertarians are somewhat closer to the anarchists than the Democrats. Because as you slide down the scale towards big government, towards the end there's the liberals, but at the very end is communism, socialism, the 2018 Democrats, slavery, the Nazis, Mao, Stalin, Lenin, all of that. And that's what I find so fascinating about what's going on in this country right now. We have groups like Antifa who say they're fighting fascists, but all they are is socialists who are just fascists with a different coat. They're running down this road towards big government while screaming that they're the resistance. I really I don't understand how these, well, I guess it is. It's the Svengali of these college professors and the media outlets that are convincing people that bigger government equals the resistance, which I really don't believe, because I believe the resistance would be closer to the anarchists, who would be the libertarians and the Republicans and the conservatives. And why? Because we don't need bigger government. We don't. Our government's too big right now. They're telling us what to do when it doesn't make sense. For example, banning menthol cigarettes. That's not a societal problem. Banning weed, keeping weed illegal on a federal level. Weed is not a societal problem. Weed does not contribute to the downfall of neighborhoods like, say, crack. But oddly enough, alcohol has far more effect on society. Drunk driving, okay, we can go back one. We'll step back one, yes. Please, if you're out there like myself smoking weed, please do not be driving, okay? First of all, it ain't fun, okay? It's not. Think about it. Treat weed like you would alcohol. But anyhow, back. Alcohol leads to all kinds of societal problems. And now I know we're never going to ban alcohol again. I get that. I support that. But that should be the barometer. If something causes less harm than drinking, then why is the government getting involved? Why is the government getting involved with food dyes that have like a 1 in a trillion chance of giving you cancer? Why? Why are they going after things only to make them more expensive? I don't really know. We have plenty of unhealthy things out there. The government does not need to be telling us what we should or shouldn't do. They can inform us and let us make our own choices. I have no problem with that. You want to get people off of sugar and fatty foods and start better diets and start exercising and all of those kinds of things. That's cool, but simply banning things, that's not what the government's supposed to be doing. And oddly enough, the things the government is supposed to be doing, especially here in the case of California, their job is to make our lives better. I guess you could say easier. And what does Gavin Newsom and the rest of the Democrats in California do? They subsidize homeless people, so we have to deal with that. They figure out ways to keep criminals out of jail, so we have to deal with that. They attack the oil industry, and our gas prices are going to rise. More refineries are shutting down in California. What's the fucking point anymore? We have some of the most oil in the entire union. And what are we doing? We're going to shut it all down. We're not going to produce it. They're going to force us to go green. They're going to force us to redo our day-to-day lives for their agenda. That's not making our lives better. Forcing me to drive an electric vehicle was not going to make my life any better. It wasn't, okay? You could talk about climate change all the frick you want. I ain't buying it, all right? I believe we should keep trying to clean things up. We should be cleaning up our washes so that we're not polluting the oceans. I'm all for all that. But this whole green initiative, how is it that we are paying our taxes, that pay these people's salaries, and then they just turn around and figure out how to make life harder and more expensive for us? That's not what government's supposed to be doing. So I had a lot of G's in mind And it's just kind of like guns, God. I don't really want to go down those roads. So I thought, I talked a little bit about family last time, a little bit about where I come from, a little bit. And I thought, you know what? Gee, grandparents. So I thought I'd talk about my grandparents. My grandpa, on my mom's side, he was an electrician and he worked on dams, to produce electricity in the Washington State area. And my mom grew up in workers' camps and, had that type of an upbringing. And when he retired, they retired to a farm. They grew and canned their own fruits and veg. They raised chickens. They traded chickens for milk. They made bread, all of that. I used to have to go up in the summertime, and we would clean out dead trees or crowded trees. I mean, I'm talking about like real trees, not little tiny things, real trees. I'd climb to the top, tie a rope off, chainsaw that tree, come down. Once it came down, chop it up into smaller pieces, take it back to the farm, and split logs for most of the day so that they would have firewood to keep them through the winter. They taught me a love of the land. They lived next to a really big forest. We'd go out there and pick blackberries with the bears. We saw the bear. The bear poop was right there on the ground, all around the blackberries. We would get those blackberries. We'd bring them back. We would turn some of them into jams, jellies, preserves, whatever. Can those things up to last through the winter. Or jar them up, I guess. Technically, we used a jar. And I learned that the good things in life are really not free. It takes a little bit of work. But things that take a little bit of work, like the bread, making bread from scratch is very hard work. And I'm not talking with any sort of machine or anything like that. I'm talking about actually just getting your hands in there. But man, that bread was so good. And those eggs were so good. And the peas, the sweet peas, oh my God, they were so good. And of course the blackberries, frick man. Blackberries from the wild, you know how good that was? That's what I learned from that side. But Grandpa, on my dad's side, he came to the United States. He immigrated here through Ellis Island in the 1930s. And he worked his way across the country until he got to Washington. He worked in steel mills. And that's some pretty tough work. He lost 3 fingers, had them burned right off. 3 fingers, burned right off by molten steel. But, he ended up in Washington, got himself established, got his citizenship going and everything. And then he was able to bring over his wife. He had married his wife in Italy and had to leave her there while he came over here. And that's one of the reasons why I take the illegal immigration subject so personally, because he had to go through all of those steps. And he really taught me a lot about, doing things the right way. And his wife, my grandma, she ended up building planes during World War II. She was one of those Rosie the Riveters. And, we were really smart in World War II. We often brought our prisoners all the way over to the United States. So even if they escaped, they were not getting back to Germany or Italy or Japan. But my dad's family would host some of these captured Italian soldiers, at dinner, showing compassion for the enemy at the time. Yes, they were countrymen and everything, but they were killing our boys. And then, out of that side of the family, they had 2 sons, and one of their sons, my dad, became a teacher and, did a really good job, helped a lot of people, put a lot of kids back on the straight and narrow. My mom was also a teacher too, and she was kindergarten, so she helped try to kick their life off right. But my dad's brother, he worked for an aerospace company, and he was a designer behind the cruise missile and some of the armaments that we still use to this day. That's the story of immigration in America. Immigrants make our country better, but at the same time, we need them to go about it the right way. It's not too much to ask, I don't think. All right, so another G we got to talk about, grass or ganja. It's another G, right? Gummies. I take a 10 milligram gummy every night. You don't need a lot. It's not about getting yourself blotto, but it can relax you from a hard day's graft. And it's not poison like booze, and it's not toxic to your relationship like booze, you just mellow out, watch a show, giggle a little bit. But the federal government still deems it illegal. After all of this time, after all of the evidence, after all of the contradictory rules about alcohol, you could advertise alcohol in the middle of the day as long as it's a streaming service or a non-over-the-air service. Right there. I mean, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's an alcohol ad. But yet weed is still illegal. And, you know, a lot of people say it's to keep the pharmaceutical companies in business. And it may very well be true, because I'll tell you something, man. That 10 milligram gummy, man, that just takes the edge off. Not every time. Some days are so bad that doesn't even work, okay? Nothing in life is perfect. That's one of the lessons. Life is a challenge. It's not always easy. We have to do things we don't want to do. I don't want to leave 5 days a week to go work, to go drive everywhere, to sit in traffic, to deal with the kind of like bomb disposal mentality my job has, where at any minute the shit could just hit the fan and sirens are going off and the fire department's showing up and people are getting pissed off and yelling and screaming at me. But you know what? I also don't want to be broke. It's a grind. That's why they call it a grind. It's a grind. And that's why I salute grinders, because I'm right here with the rest of you. I would love to be sitting here playing video games, making YouTube videos about my video games and espousing my political views and handing out life lessons and maybe even doing a quick thirst trap video for TikTok. But that doesn't pay the bills. I got to do what pays the bills. And I'll tell you what's even tougher than life. Going through it single, that's pretty tough. I would not want to do that. But marriage is tough too. And, you know, as somebody who's now been married over 30 years, you know, I'm just going to throw out my advice right now. You cannot expect it to be a honeymoon for 50 years. It gets hard. Time is stolen away. Attention is stolen away. But if you could just find happiness sitting on your couch watching Ludwig, you can make it. But understand, it gets boring. It gets stale. But in this life, you have to have a partner. If you can't find a partner out there, well, you're probably not trying hard enough, or you have too high of expectations. Because that's another thing about marriage. You're going to have to accept things that maybe a 20-year-old version of yourself was like, oh, no, I would never. If my wife didn't do this or she did that, oh, no. Yeah, reality is that sometimes you just have to accept stuff. But, man, you know, from the bottom of my heart, we're in this together. United we stand, divided we fall. I believe that wholeheartedly. I'm Kid Copious. I'm Purple State Party, and so are you. Love one another. Stay true. Keep grinding. And always dance it out.